What's going on, guys? It's Clutch Plays here, and with the NBA season at a halt, we're going to be looking back in time at the Steve Mills era. With the Leon Rose era ahead of us, things are starting to look a lot better than they have in a pretty long time. The reason for this isn't necessarily because of how good Leon Rose seems to be, rather how bad our two presidents have been. Now, I usually hate making videos on the Knicks past, but since the NBA is postponed, it seems like an interesting concept to see just how bad Steve Mills was. In this video, we are going to be walking through every single move that Steve Mills made just as the president of the New York Knicks, and now that some time has passed, we have a pretty good idea of how bad or good the move has turned out to be. If you guys enjoy this type of content and want to see a video on Phil Jackson's tenure with the Knicks in the future, or something along those lines, make sure you comment down below. Before I get into the video though, I want to say that my last video was an April Fool's prank, but over 50% of you guys watching didn't see where I said it was a prank at the end. Just know that this video was a joke. Now, if you guys could also like this video, I would really appreciate it, and let's get right into it. Number 1. The Tim Hardaway Jr. contract. Steve Mills was looked at as a savior after the Phil Jackson firing, and things looked to be trending in the right direction. However, the very first move that Steve Mills made as the president was signing Tim Hardaway Jr. to a 4-year, $71 million contract. This did not seem terrible at the time because of how bad things had been previously with the Knicks. However, this changed quickly. After one season with the Knicks, Tim Hardaway Jr. became an extremely inefficient shooter and one of the worst contracts in the entire NBA. Reports later came out saying that the Knicks would have to attach 2 future first-round picks to get rid of his contract, showing how terrible a move this was. Steve Mills had complete power over the signing, and the worst part about this is the fact that Steve Mills was in a bidding war with himself. The Hawks were only willing to sign him to a 4-year, $48 million deal, which is $23 million less than what he got paid. This was by far one of the worst decisions by the New York Knicks in the past decade, and maybe in the history of the Knicks, and on a scale of 1 to 10, he receives a 1. Number 2. The Ron Baker signing. Everyone loved Ron Baker, but this man was signed to a 2-year, $8.9 million contract just 3 years ago. Currently, he's out of the NBA playing professional basketball overseas in Russia. That should explain how terrible a contract this was, and only because Ron will forever be a Knicks legend, this move receives a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is very generous. Number 3, hiring Scott Perry. The one bright spot with the Knicks front office is Scott Perry. Scott Perry has drafted extremely well with his picks and has been able to find late draft gems in Mitchell Robinson and Ignas Brazdeikis. During Scott Perry's time as the general manager, there has not been a better GM at finding players late in the draft. Scott also flipped Marcus Morris for draft capital at the trade deadline and has shown that he wants to build the Knicks through the draft and not take any shortcuts. This is what the Knicks need from their GM, and this signing that Steve Mills made deserves a 10 out of 10 without a doubt. Number 4, the David Fizdale hiring. Do I even need to explain how terrible a signing this was, because I could talk for an hour on how bad a coach he was. Dave was a decent developmental coach, but he wasn't able to actually coach. His rotations were disgusting. He had no clue how to draw plays, his game management was terrible, and for some reason, the young players he was developing all regressed. He has no clue what to do late in games and led an okay Knicks team to a 4-18 record to begin the season. The Knicks were supposed to be on the brink of making the playoffs, but Dave had no clue how to motivate the team, and the Knicks had one of the worst defenses in the entire NBA. Defense and motivation were supposed to be 2 of David Fizdale's biggest strengths, but clearly it wasn't. I could go on and on about this one, but overall this move receives a solid 3 out of 10. Number 5, the 2018 Knicks draft class. The 2018 draft class of Mitch, Trier, and Kevin Knox was one of the Knicks' best draft classes in the past 10 years. Mitch was taken with the 35th pick in the draft, and even though Steve Mills was not the one leading the Knicks draft rankings, his contribution was probably helpful, I'm guessing. Also, signing the undrafted free agent in Trier was an incredible find. The Knicks were between Kevin Knox, Mikal Bridges, and Miles Bridges for the 9th pick, so in all reality, this pick was not all that bad. Kevin has more potential than all of them, and he is still very young. These draft selections were pretty good and deserve a solid 8 out of 10. Number 6, the Kristaps Porzingis trade. This was one of the worst days as a Knicks fan, but in all reality, it may have been for the better. KP didn't want to play for us and basically backstabbed every single Knicks fan. The trade was executed way too fast and resulted in DSJ, the expiring contracts of DeAndre Jordan and Wesley Matthews, and 2 future Mavs first-round picks, all for KP, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Courtney Lee. The Knicks made this trade to go after KD and Kyrie, who had their eyes set on going to New York the entire time. In this situation, the Knicks got extremely unlucky as KD got hurt and ended up choosing the Nets over the Knicks with Kyrie Irving. At the time, this trade set up the Knicks for an incredible future with tons of cap space and a huge free agent class, multiple future first round picks to use to draft players or make trades, and a very promising point guard in Dennis Smith Jr. The trade looked incredible for the Knicks at the time, but then all of a sudden DSJ sucks out of nowhere, KD gets hurt, the Nets become the favorite to land KD and Kyrie out of nowhere, and the Mavs turn into one of the best teams in the West. The worst case scenario basically happened to the Knicks, and as bad a trade this looks now, since the trade seemed good at the time, I would give it a 4 out of 10. Number 6, the 2019 Knicks draft class. Steve Mills once again had a say in this draft class, however, a report came out once Steve Mills was fired saying that he wanted to trade back in the draft. This would most likely result in the Knicks trading back in the draft, selecting Cam Reddish and attaining some other sort of compensation. This would be a terrible decision because RJ has been a bright spot with the Knicks. It was clear that he wouldn't have an incredible rookie season like Zion because he couldn't shoot, but he was still very effective. His shot mechanics are good but very inconsistent, which should hopefully improve with more repetition. His potential is very high, and best of all, he thrives in the spotlight. Trading away RJ Barrett would have been one of the most idiotic moves in the history of the Knicks franchise that would have been made if Steve Mills had complete control. Thank goodness that this was not the case, and for Steve's logic alone, he deserves a 3 out of 10. Number 7. The 2019 Knicks free agents. Shortly after the draft, Steve Mills and Scott Perry put together a plan for free agency. They decided to keep their cap space flexible and sign veteran players to complement the young guys. However, the free agent class did have clear-cut good and bad signings. The good signings were Reggie Bullock, Marcus Morris, and Elfrid Payton. All three of these players have overperformed their contract and have been great leaders for this young team. However, it's obvious that the bad signings were Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, and worst of all, Wayne Ellington. We didn't sign Julius Randle as a point guard, and he doesn't understand that. Bobby Portis just flat out sucks. By the highlights on the screen, it's obvious Wayne is just a terrible, not needed, garbage shooting guard for the New York Knicks. The Knicks didn't panic after missing out on KD and Kyrie, and had some great signings while still keeping cap flexibility for the future. There were obviously better things to do with the cap space, like taking on bad contracts, but this free agency wasn't terrible by any means. The Knicks rebounded well, and Steve Mills definitely deserves a 7 out of 10 for his work. Number 8. The Knicks 2020 NBA trade deadline. I did a lot of digging for this information, but this is what Steve Mills wanted to do at the trade deadline. Most of you guys know that Steve Mills was trying to create a D'Lo trade and wanted to include the Knicks 2021 first round pick unprotected. This was a huge red flag, and making this trade would basically put us in a hole of mediocrity for a pretty long time. Next, Steve Mills also wanted to make a trade with the Hornets involving Malik Monk and DSJ. This didn't seem terrible at first, but then news broke out that he wanted to complete a deal that included Julius Randle, DSJ, and a future first round pick, all for Malik Monk and the terrible contract of Terry Rozier. Wanting to make this trade is mind-boggling, and it really makes me question his decision making. Finally, Steve Mills wanted to keep hold of Marcus Morris, which just makes no sense at all. All in all, this trade deadline would have been a complete disaster with Steve Mills as the president, and thank God he's out of here. His mindset for the trade deadline was so bad, there is not a single number that can be used to describe how bad it was. However, we'll give him a 2 out of 10 to be nice. In conclusion, if you add up all the grades Steve Mills received, he would have a 38 out of 80, which is pretty awful. We are so lucky to have this cancer out of our organization, and things are looking bright with Scott Perry and Leon Rose. However, after these disastrous past few years, honestly anything will be an upgrade. I don't know how hard rebuilding a team like the Knicks is, because as long as you keep Scott Perry as the GM and build a decent reputation, things will turn around quickly. Tell me if you guys want to see another video like this, but reviewing every single one of Phil Jackson's moves and giving a number score from 1 to 10. After we could compare it to Steve Mills' score of 38 out of 80 and see who was the worst president of the New York Knicks. Comment if you guys want to see it, or if you don't want to, make sure you comment down below so I know not to make another video like this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you leave a like. This video was pretty fun to make actually, and expect more videos about the Knicks past during the hiatus. Now with that out of the way, I'm out, and peace!